Gittin, Daf Yomi, when to lie in business. Consider the situation. You're negotiating for a piece of property. They're asking $1 million for the property. You're willing to pay 900,000. That's your limit. You believe, having done your homework, the buyer would be very happy with 800,000. So he's asking $1 million. He'd be happy with 800,000. You're willing to go up to 900,000. So you put in a bid at what, Ricky? Where would you put in a bid in that scenario? 700,000. Put in a bid at 700,000. They negotiate and negotiate. Eventually he gets you up to 800,000. And then he says to you, we're both B'nai Torah, we're honest people, just tell me one thing, yes or no, and then we'll do the deal. Is this your best offer? Are you willing to go any higher, or is this it? What do? The truth is, no, I'm actually willing to go another 100,000 higher. But that messes up your strategy. You're going to lose $100,000 by telling the truth. What do you have to do? That's the case that we're going to learn. And that's something that applies in business every single day. Says the Gemara, Rav Sheshes havale ashtrasod de sarbeli b'mechoiza. Rav Sheshes had sold some coats. If you look at Rashi, it says sarbeli is a coat. It's one of the few cases where we can understand the French word that Rashi gives us. So he had sold some coats in mechoiza, and they owed him money. There was some trade finance involved, and they owed him money for the coats. Amar le Rav Yosef bar Chama, he said to Rav Yosef bar Chama, Bahadi da'atit aitinu ni'ali. You're going to mechoiza, won't you do me a favor? Go and see my customers and claim the money they owe me and bring it back to me. Ozali went, Yavinale, and they gave him the money. Amrile, but they said to him, having given him the money, Nikni minach. Do a kinyan with us, as Rashi explains, that unsa de'ulcha lo lehadel l'tovon. If something happens on the way and you're robbed and you lose the money, don't come back and claim from us. We now are done, we've paid you the money, and our responsibility is complete. Amalo in the Sofish Tamitlu. They said this to him just before davening on Shachris, and he said, I'm just busy putting on my tefillin. He put on his tefillin, and he skipped out of shul just before the last Kaddish, and they couldn't get hold of him, so he didn't do the kinyan. When he came to Rav Sheshes, he told him the story, and he says, you did correctly, that you didn't allow yourself to become enslaved as a debtor to these people. You didn't borrow anything from them. Why should you be responsible to them? If something happened to you on the way, you did the right thing. Another version was Shapir Avdit Eved Lovel Ish Malve. You did right. They are responsible to me. They're an Eved Lovel Ish Malve. They are responsible to me. You did the right thing. Either way, he praises him for doing the right thing when he seems to have actually skipped out of doing what he had agreed to do. Says the Agos Yavitz. We've spoken about the Yavitz before, Rabbi Yaakov Emden, 18th century, that wonderful time we spoke about the other day. Rabbi Yaakov Emden took issue with a lot of people. He took issue with Rabbi Yonasan Eibeshitz, and he took issue with the Ramchal, and he wrote a very interesting thing. Among other things, he was the person who believed and wrote Paul in the New Testament was a Talmud of Rabban Gamliel, and that he held that shituf is mutter for an akum, for a non-Jewish person is allowed to believe in God and others. A Jew is not allowed to. A Jew, there's only Hashem. But for a non-Jew, as long as you believe in Hashem, the superpower of the world, of the universe, and there are other elements to divinity, for a Goy it's okay. So he believed it was good. Rather let the Goyim believe in Christianity and have an emunah in the Ribono Shel Olam and have an ethical kind of a system of law, rather than just be wild barbarians as they were at that time. So he encouraged Christianity as a Talmud of Rabban Gamliel. That's a shita of Rabbi Yaakov Emden, among other things. So Rabbi Yaakov Emden writes here, on the side of his Gemara, Nichtav B'tzida, Shebechol ki hai gavne lesbe mishum midvar sheker tirchak mishum sheir Yisrael. You'll ask, what about midvar sheker tirchak? You're not supposed to do dishonest things. How does this work? Kivan delo mechayev behu v'lo yachol la'atzil mi'adam ba'ofen acher. Since he doesn't owe them anything, he's just a shaliach. He's doing a favor for Rav Sheshes. But they won't let him do the favor without this. They're blackmailing him. They're saying, if you want to be Mekayim your shlichus, if you want to take the money back as Rav Sheshes asked you to do, then I require you to make this undertaking. So he's blackmailing them. They're blackmailing him. Im lo yaftichem al sheker. So his only way to protect himself from blackmail is to be dishonest. And he adds, Rabbi Yaakov Emden adds, Nere mishum deloshon ein. Also he says the word in Aramaic, in means yes. In Hebrew, ein means no. So he used a word which had two meanings. When they said, will you guarantee it? Will you be responsible? He said in. And in his mind, I'm saying in meaning no. In their mind, they heard in meaning yes. And that, of course, is also difficult. Surely what governs your honesty is how other people understand you, not whether you had some kind of tricky intention. That very, very difficult. So let's understand this. Omer Rav Yehuda Omer Shmuel in Bava Metzia Daf Chav Gimel. Bahani tzlat mili avidi rabbonon de meshanu b'milayu. There are three circumstances in which Talmidei Chachomim can change their words. In other words, say something dishonest. B'masechet, b'puria, uv'shpiza. Masechet explains, Rashi, is if a person asks you how much you learn, you can say less than how much you know, you can say less. You don't have to be honest about exactly how much you know. And in Bepuria, if they ask you about your intimate relationships with your wife, you don't have to answer, you can tell a lie. It's none of their business. And Bushpiza, if they ask you about, do you know somebody in Ra'anana who's a really good host that I can come to Shabbos where they'll treat me well, and the woman is a really good cook, and they've got comfortable beds, and there are not too many children making too much noise. You don't have to tell them who it is or what, because it just creates an imposition on somebody else. So in that situation, you can say, yeah, I stayed at so-and-so, but I don't know if I would recommend it. You can actually say that. The one we want to focus on is Puria. When somebody asks you a question that they have no right to the answer. That's a situation. We learned in the last Matmonim about how to ask the right questions. But sometimes there are absolutely the wrong questions which you're not supposed to be asking. Everybody is entitled to a veil of privacy. And if somebody through a probing, questioning, wants to pierce your veil of privacy, you don't have to be honest about that. You can protect yourself when the only way to protect yourself is by telling a lie. In Yevomis, the Gemara goes further and says, Mutar lo la'adam l'shanot b'dvar hashalom. You're allowed to be dishonest in order to keep the peace. And the Gemara learns that from Yosef, where the brothers say to Yosef, our father told us that you wouldn't do us any harm, although there was never such a conversation. And Rabbi Nosson says it's a mitzvah, where there's shalom, you've got to tell an untruth. And he brings the raya from Shmuel, where Shmuel is told by Hashem to go and anoint David, and he says, what happens if Shaul will hear that that's what I've done? That says Hashem is to tell Shaul, you take a goat with you, and tell Shaul that you're going to bring a korban. You don't have to tell him why you're going. That's a lie. I'm not going to bring a korban, I'm going to anoint David. The Rabbi Shmuel learns it from Hashem and Sorah, where Sorah says, Va'aduni zaken. She laughs when she hears she's going to become pregnant. She says, my husband is an old man. And when Hashem repeats it to Avram, he says, Va'ani zakanti. He repeats it inaccurately and says, Sorah said, I'm too old to have a baby. That's not what she said. She said, he's too old. But Hashem changes it. So what do we see? When it's all very well to have values. Everybody's got values. I think I've mentioned to you, I did research once about the values of criminals in prisons. And I found they had the same values as the Pope. There's no difference in the values. The difference is when values conflict with one another, or when self-interest conflicts with a value. How do you treat the value? How do you live? Everybody wants their children to be honest and upright and fair and integrous and so on. All the good things we all want, and we all want for ourselves, we want for our children. The question is, how do you define those values? And what do you do when those values come into conflict with one another? It says the Gemara, when MS comes into conflict with shalom, shalom wins. You don't tell the truth if it's going to cause machlokes. That's how important shalom is, and that's how important it is to avoid machlokes. Asks Tosfos in Bava Metzia, so why, when it lists the three things that you can change, that you can tell a lie for, doesn't it include shalom? It says Tosfos, because they all come under the category of shalom. The essence of it all is shalom. That to keep the peace, one can change the facts a little bit, one can change the truth in order to keep the peace. It doesn't mean like the media do, changing the facts not to keep the peace. You can change the facts to keep the peace. And Bepuria, the important one to learn for our purposes is Bepuria, when somebody asks a question they're not entitled to the answer of. And your thoughts are nobody else's business. The problem is, so why can't you just say none of your business? Somebody asks you about your intimate relationship with your wife. Why can't you say that's none of your business? Because when you say that's none of your business, you're answering it. If somebody says, do you beat your wife? Chas v'sholem, and you say none of your business. If you really don't, you would say, how dare you even suggest such a thing? Of course not. If you say none of your business, you're already defending yourself. There are situations where refusing to answer is a self-accusation. And in such a case, nobody has the right to ask you a question, where if you don't answer it, you're actually implicating yourself. So the only way to protect yourself is through a lie. That's their problem. They asked a question where that put you in a situation where the only way you could protect yourself is by telling a lie. That's not fair. They did wrong there. And it's the same with any of one's thoughts. Nobody is entitled to know what you're thinking. They're entitled to ask you about what you're doing. But nobody is entitled to ask you what your plans are. It's in your own mind. You're entitled to the veil of privacy of every person. What do you think of so-and-so? None of your business what I think of so-and-so. And if you don't like so-and-so, you can lie and say, I think he's a mensch, I think he's a nice person. As long as that lie is not going to bring the other person to loss and to damage. But he has no right to ask you, what do you think of? And we're very quick to give opinions as to what do we think? What do you think of the government? What do you think of this law? What do you think? It's none of your business what I think. Why does it make a difference to you what I think? Are you asking me a shaila? Is it going to make a difference to you? If it doesn't make a difference to you, why are you asking me what I think? What I think is my own business. It was an interesting interview I watched the other day of Melanie Phillips talking about why the British people and the world were so impressed with Queen Elizabeth and with the monarchy. And she explains how the idea that nobody ever knew what her opinion was about anything. She stood for something above personal opinion. And nobody knew what a personal opinion. If you would ask her, what do you think of such and such, she would never comment. Go through a whole life like that. None of your business what my opinion is. But if somebody does probe you in a way where you have no choice but to protect the privacy of your own thinking by telling a lie, then you tell a lie in order to protect your own privacy. So when somebody says, is this your best offer? That's not a question you're allowed to ask somebody. None of your business if it's my best offer or not. I'm offering 800,000. Do you want it or don't you want it? To ask me what I'm thinking, what my plan is, what my strategy is. You're not privy to my strategy. My strategy is a thought, and you don't have a right to ask about my thinking. And where does this come from? It comes from the famous medrash in the beginning of Bereshis, where Hashem wants to create Odom, and Nasu Malache Ashoris Kittim. The angels got into different groups. Some say he should be created, some say he shouldn't. Chesed said he should be created. Emes says he shouldn't because he's a liar. Human beings are going to be dishonest. Tzedek says he should be created. Sholem says he shouldn't. So in order to get a majority, it's now 2 against 2. The Rebbeinu Shalom casts Emes out, truth, and throws it down to the earth. And they say, Emes is the essence of who you are, Rebbeinu Shalom. Says the Rebbeinu Shalom, I want Emes to come from the earth. I don't want to impose fundamentalist Emes, absolute truth. We don't deal with absolute truth. Absolute truth is the Rebbeinu Shalom. I want the Chachomim to work out the truth according to the situation and circumstances in the world. And there's the famous Ktsos HaChoshen that I bring at the end, which is we talked about the Ktsos HaChoshen in our last Matmonim shiur, but in his Psiche, in his opening, in his Hakdama, in his introduction to the Sefer, he talks about this medrash and the importance of us being able to create truth using the Torah as the way we think it through. And the conclusions we come to using the Torah, and part of the using the Torah is shalom, is doing it in such a way that it comes to peace, that it doesn't come to machlokes. If your emes leads to machlokes, that's not the emes that the Rebbeinu Shalom wants. Even if on an absolute sense the facts are right. You say, but it's true. It doesn't matter, but it's true. You've destroyed something. And we're not allowed to be destructive of peace with shalom. And even when we're allowed to tell a lie, and this comes to the second part of Rabbi Yaakov Emden, we learn from Esav, when Yaakov says to his father Yitzchak, Anochi Esav b'chorecha, I am Esav, your firstborn. Says Rashi, say Chazal, that's a lie. You're not Esav the firstborn. Says Rashi, Anochi amevi lecha ve'esav b'chorecha. I'm the person bringing you the food. Esav is your b'chor. That's what's in his mind. Asiti, I've done what you've asked me. I often do what you've asked me. So in his mind, he's not telling a lie. The father is being deceived. What is that about? That's the same as Rabbi Yaakov Emden says in our sugya. Because the Lashon in can be used both ways. This is not to be deceitful with your language. This is midvar sheker tirchak. Even when the halacha allows you to lie, and according to Rabbi Nosson in Bava Metzia, it's a mitzvah to tell a lie for the sake of shalom. Even when you're allowed to tell a lie, or it's a mitzvah to tell a lie, do it in such a way that you're conscious of it and you're using words that could be understood the right way, so that you don't become desensitized to it. That even while you're telling a permissible lie, try to tell it in a way where in your mind it's not dishonest. At least you're not being dishonest to yourself. At least you're being honest to yourself, even though halachically you're allowed to, and in fact obligated to be dishonest to the person to whom you're speaking. That's the level of the importance of honesty and how far we go. But to understand that there are bigger things even than honesty. For some people, honesty is the absolute ultimate. Yes, it is. But honesty as defined by the Torah is an honesty that brings to shalom, not an honesty that brings chas v'shalom to machlokes, dissension, and division.